Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We are the official news channel for CARE, which stands for the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. Amity meaning friendship, and restoration meaning, hey, if you haven't noticed, our planet needs some help. And we all need to come together to make real change in this world. But before you can do that, you have to know what's really going on. And if you're just tuned into mainstream media or the alternative media, you are still hearing narratives. And they're actually coming from the same people. They just want to provide the illusion of different perspectives out there. But it's still all controlled opposition. Okay? What we do on the news is we have access to the highest security clearance on this planet. So we can tell you exactly what's going on, and we can separate fact from fiction. And we do this through our newscast that comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you want more information on how to access that newscast and watch it on all of your devices, you can go to unitednetwork.tv. On this podcast, we highlight some of the stories that we talk about on our newscast, and that includes local stories, which come from you, who we call our field messengers. We have stories about the new Earth and where our planet is going, so we can be prepared for that because it's amazing. We talk about regional stories from the perspective of how it impacts the people. So they're world stories, but we're tired of talking about what the so-called government is doing because they're all just talking heads with agendas that come from somewhere else. Everybody's controlled. So we don't talk about that anymore, but it is important for you to know what's being done that specifically impacts you. And we talk about that in our regional stories from around the world. And then we have what's called our World Situation Report. And that talks about stuff I guarantee you have not heard anywhere else on this planet. Because again, you have to have the highest level of security in order to have access to this information. And we know that the bad guys that think they're running the show right now listen to our newscast to find out what's really going on. So if that doesn't tell you that we're on the right track, what will, right? So some of the information that we present to you guys may be surprising. So if you're coming to us from mainstream media or someone recommended that you listen to this podcast, well, first of all, welcome. But I guarantee some things are going to shock you. When that happens, don't just slough this off as being some crazy conspiracy theory podcast, okay? Because it's real. And if you look at the track record, a lot of the conspiracy theorists have been right. I'm just saying, okay? So maybe don't lump us into that category quite yet. Take the information that we give you, do your own research, and stop believing people just because they have an audience or they're on some network or even having a podcast. That should not qualify you as having truth and providing truth. But know this, that you as a human being have a built-in lie detector built into your body that you have to start relying on. Now, there have been a lot of things in the past that have come against that and made that little lie detector not work as well as it should. But we are cleaning and clearing stuff out now. A lot of dark energy, a lot of dark matter that disconnected you from God, source, the creator. And when you are disconnected from God, that little lie detector in your body does not work as well. But that's changing. So you will start to know if someone is lying to you simply from your own discernment. So practice that, okay? But don't believe anybody just because they say something. I don't care how big their channel is. It doesn't matter. Think critically and ask questions. All right, guys, let's get started. Here is the rundown for today, which is Monday, November 6, 2023. In each newscast, we kick things off with our field messenger reports because this is the heart and soul of what UNN is all about. It's about people like you telling us what's happening in your community. That's how we're going to break down the lies. That's how we're going to break down stereotypes, because all of this craziness in the world right now is orchestrated. This is not how we naturally are as human beings. We are naturally good people. But with everything that was keeping us from the Creator, we start to forget who we are. And we start to segment ourselves and separate ourselves. And when you separate yourself from society and your own little cliques and groups, then you lose empathy. But one way to help with that is for us all to come back together and start telling our own stories. And that's what our field messengers do. Anybody can be a field messenger. You don't need any special training. You literally use the camera on your smartphone because it's probably the best camera you have in your house, let's face it. And you tell us what's happening. These could be news stories. These could be community events. Whatever rings true to you, why not record something and send it in? We can either put it up on the news and or the United Network app. So if you want more information on that, you can go to unitednetwork.news. There is a section for field messengers, and you can read more about it. We had 3 field messenger reports on the news today. The first one we called Redefining Happy Family, and this comes to us from Cindy in California, who is very happy in her report today. She's actually personally impacted by her story. And she was in San Luis Obispo, which is it's not quite Southern California. I'm in Southern California, so it's a little bit further north. And this is a story about a law change in California, and it's regarding adoption. Now, in the past, I think she said in 2013, California made a change to who could adopt a child, meaning, let's say you've got a single parent and you want someone else to help you co-parent. Who can be added, to this legally to help you? Because obviously it's a lot for single parents, right? And so I believe it was 2013, California changed it so you could add another parent. They had to be a new spouse or some sort of relative to the child. Well, the big change now is basically what I view as an upgrade to the law, and that is that now non-spouses and non-relatives can be added as parents to help co-parent a child, which, Cindy points out in her report. This allows for more love to go to the child, more happiness, probably more money, right? It's just a beautiful thing. And I have to tell you, I grew up in a family where my parents were married, still are married, and I didn't have any huge tragedies in my family that, would divide us. But I often wondered with people that maybe, God forbid, something happened to a parent, and they grew up as an orphan or something like that, or, it wasn't kind of a more traditional style family. How would you feel? And how could you get those feelings back of having what I call a family? Now, that could mean multiple things, but people around you that love you. And this is one way to do that. I just think it's absolutely beautiful. Like I said, it impacted Cindy personally. She's very excited about this law, and it truly is a beautiful thing. Our next story comes from Amy in Louisiana, and it is about a census survey that was sent to her. And I believe she said she kind of held off on it for a while because, when you get those things from the government, actually something similar happened to me. I got one for one of my businesses, and they said I had to, fill out all this information, and I kept putting it on hold. But they are quite convincing because they will keep reaching out to you and, no, I won't say threaten, but they indicate to you that somehow the situation is going to escalate if you don't reply. And it can be a little intimidating, right? So Amy gets this census survey in the mail, and she starts combing through it. And she basically just shares with us what's in the survey. And, they say that this information is going to be confidential. But is that really true? I mean, you are talking about the government here. She brings up some really good points. And they ask very personal questions. And you're kind of mandated or required. It's not a law per se. But again, they use intimidation to make you think that you're going to be in trouble and things are going to escalate if you don't complete this. But does the government really have the right to do this? I would love for someone to actually bring this to, a judge, which, Got to be careful with that one, too, because all of this is deep state, guys. If you don't already know that, I mean, the deep state owns judges. They own the courts. I mean, it's a mess. The whole thing has to be revamped. And maybe people have taken it to a judge before, but it doesn't seem like you would have to reply to everything in there, because who knows what kind of questions they could ask. And that's exactly what Amy presents, is why do we have to do this and how can they possibly do this? Some really great questions there. Personally, I think it's something that needs to be revamped. And then our final story comes from Lawrence in New Mexico, and he got some amazing pictures of, I believe it was the most recent lunar eclipse. If you guys didn't know, we've had 2 in the period of like the last month. And one, I think the first one, the media covered a lot. The second one, not so much. And honestly, I'm not sure which lunar eclipse this one was, but he took some great pictures, and he's located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He calls it the path of totality. So I'm assuming that is, you can see the path of the eclipse very clearly, perhaps one of the best locations for that. He says that Albuquerque is a mile high above sea level, and he had this incredible view. So he showed us these, he must have a really good camera, because he showed us these still photos of it moving into alignment. And at one point, looking like an eyeball is just staring at you in the sky, which, considering all of the symbology that the deep state uses, was a little freaky to me, but it's nature, right? And obviously we are now in a light age, or, if you haven't been following the news, we have transitioned recently from a dark age, which was millions and millions of years. We are now in a light age. And so when these types of things happen, yes, the dark side has been using alignments to try to bring in demons and lower astral beings for a really long time. But now they can't do that because we're in a light age. So having these kind of alignments is really beautiful, because we know this type of bad stuff can't happen anymore. We're in a light age, and it can only be a good thing for us. And as Lawrence was mentioning in his story, he could just feel the energy shining down on the planet. All right, speaking of the planet, let's talk about the new Earth. And this is one of my favorite parts of the news, because we do stories to help kind of get you out of that mindset of the false matrix, okay, where we were kind of stuck doing the same thing over and over again on that proverbial hamster wheel. Well, things have changed. And now truly anything is possible. Our entire planet is changing. Us as humanity are changing. And we need to know what this new Earth, what we call the new Earth, is going to be like. So the first story that we have is actually an interview. It's an interview I did with Lindsay Andriotti, who happens to be a friend of mine, but she is also amazing at helping people discover their potential. And we did an interview today about confidence. Because as we transition into the new Earth, confidence is going to be really important. And I said on the news today, listen, light beings, as a light being, there's something within you that knows that the light side has won. You just know it. It's innate. It's part of your being. You can't shake it. But you still live in this 3D world with this false matrix that is crumbling around you. And part of the whole deep state death spiral is seeing their lies everywhere. And the lies are coming down and they are being exposed, but we kind of have this yo-yo effect going on within our person, within our bodies. And that's really what 4D is all about. 4D is in between, obviously, 3D and 5D. We're not at 5D yet. That's where our planet is heading. So we kind of do this yo-yo and we end up somewhere around 4D when we do that. And so we know where we're going, but we need to have the confidence to get there. And so Lindsay brings up some really great things about, first of all, you have to know what area you feel weakest in, because usually that's where you lack confidence, in an area you feel weak in. And then you also have to know your areas of strength. So be fair to yourself, right? Don't just focus on your weakness. That'll just get you down, but you need to be aware of it. And focus on the stuff that you're really good at, because that's going to build up your confidence. And then you also really want to try, she says, to not compare yourself to other people. I know how difficult that is. We all do it, okay? But if you can feel secure in yourself, then that is going to give you more confidence. And one of the confidence deal breakers is constantly comparing yourself. Oh, well, she's this or he's that. That is just you tearing yourself down. So don't do it. And then the final thing she talks about is staying open to change. There is this thing, because obviously everything is changing with the new earth, right? I don't know if you've noticed this, but the more often you stay out of your comfort zone, the more comfortable you start to feel with being uncomfortable, if that makes sense, which is a great place to be in for confidence, right? Because if everything is changing in the world, and that's truly not an exaggeration, okay? Everything is changing in the world, and you want to be confident. You have to be confident even during uncertainty. So the more time you spend in uncertainty, the more comfortable and confident you feel. I know it kind of sounds strange, but that's truly how it works. So I encourage you guys to check out that interview, and we're going to have Lindsay back on the show. We have all of our experts scheduled for multiple segments, so she'll be back on the show probably in a couple weeks. The other couple stories that we have in this segment, one is about an autism-friendly gym. So this is a gym primarily designed for children, but it can accommodate people on the spectrum of all ages. And it's not just for autism. It's for other conditions as well, but they focus on play-based therapy. There may only be one location for this right now, but the reason we do these stories is to get your mind thinking, oh, this would be great in my area. So when projects are available and you can start to submit your projects for funding, maybe something like this would really work well in your area. And the reason this whole gym exists is it's to help, these people on the spectrum, primarily kids, but all people. And it's to help them manage stress. And this is what they found it really helps with. Manage stress, develop cognitive abilities, as well as enhance social skills. The gym has an image-based communication system, as well as iPads to enhance communication for anyone who is nonverbal or if you have any kind of speech issue. See, this is how it helps people with other conditions as well. And there's different things in the gym like balance trampolines, and then they have monkey bars, which help build your upper body strength. And they have something called relaxation hammock swings, which I think we all need in our homes, not just in a gym, right? And it's beautiful, too, because they also bring in volunteers and also employ people who are on the spectrum. And that can really help them with opportunities, right, to actually have a job, and be able to function and help other people on the spectrum as well. So it's really beautiful. And our final story is about cosplay. When I think of cosplay, I think of like adults dressing up in like science fiction, superhero costumes, really tight costumes. But that's not exactly what it is. It's kind of gotten a name for itself, with Comic-Con and things like that. But really, cosplay stands for costume play. And the reason we're doing this story is this kind of falls more into, ideas for parents and families. Because costume play, meaning making costumes, dressing up, having fun that way, is a really great way to bond with your children and also teach them different skills. Okay, so you can collaborate on costume design. So don't just go out and buy a costume, right? Make some stuff. You can choose between a background of characters. There's a bunch of different characters you can become, learn more about the character, right? So this gets into imagination and fantasy. It also enhances research skills. Like maybe it's not a superhero, maybe it's a historical person that your child is or you are dressing up as. So you have to do the research behind the person. It can raise cultural awareness of certain issues and things like that. And it also teaches them things like budgeting, right? Because you can say, hey, we're only spending $10 on our costumes. So we have to make sure that, maybe you're repurposing materials, you're going to the Dollar Tree for different things, or maybe Goodwill or Salvation Army, a secondhand store to get the material, right? And then there's the sewing and crafting and putting it all together. So I thought that was an interesting story. It's really getting our minds outside of, what it means to interact with our children. Because let's face it, and honestly, my kids have the same problem, and that is screen time, okay? Yes, screens can be amazing. They can teach different things, but it is really hard to have a child right now that isn't addicted to screens in some capacity. So this is just one way to kind of break that monotony of screen time. And, everyone can have fun. Everyone, it's fun to just be silly. I think this is why we just had Halloween, right? Now, I know that people have their own opinions on Halloween. One of the things that I like about it, though, is it encourages this kind of imagination. And that can be a beautiful thing, but you can do this with cosplay as well. And now for our regional news. Now, usually with these headlines, I try to break down what the story is really saying. And there might be a little bit of that in the stories that we talk about today, but some of this is just updating you on what's happening in the world right now, some of the logistical stuff that really does impact the people. So our first story is about Maersk. Okay, so they are a huge shipping company, and they are cutting 10% of their workforce. They're cutting it by 10,000 people, so it went from about 110,000 to 100,000. And they're saying that the reason behind this is because there is decreased demand, which they really didn't elaborate on demand. But we all know, like when your budget is tight, you're going to be purchasing less goods, right? And services. So that could be part of it as well, right? People just aren't buying, they're not just, whimfully going out and just buying a bunch of stuff. We are on budgets and we really have to watch our spending. So that could be part of the decreased demand. Also, they talk a little bit about increased operational costs. I don't know if this is such a bad thing. It really depends on what we're shipping, because we are shipping way too much stuff, especially when it comes to food. I mean, there is no reason you should go to your local grocery store and be getting oranges from Japan if you're not in Japan, okay? If you're in the U.S., you should be getting oranges from, your local, orchard, if that's possible, if you've got those in your area, or the closest one. Or maybe you just don't have oranges for a little bit. That is not the end of the world, guys. We have got to start sourcing things locally. So when I see things like this, again, I don't know what is on these shipping, crates and these shipping crates and stuff, but I don't know. I'm kind of like, do we really need to be shipping as much stuff? Is this really a bad thing? So we'll see. Next story is about Delhi in India. Okay, so the place, Delhi, right? And their pollution levels. I don't know if you've ever been outside of your country, or perhaps your country really does struggle with pollution levels. I know this was a long time ago, but I went to Egypt. And I think this was at least 15 years ago. I went to Egypt. And one of the things I was so surprised about is in what I would call like the main area of Egypt. You have these huge high-rise buildings, and the pollution that just accumulates on the outside of these buildings is crazy. And there's like a fog, just in the air. And that's all pollution. I had never been in a place that's like that. And that's what I was thinking about when we were running this story. Now, of course, we're not talking about Egypt. We're talking about Delhi in India. But the story is about primary schools are being closed. They are closed right now until November 10th, which is in 4 days from now. And it's because of the dangerous pollution levels, and they're trying to protect the kids. Now, grades 6 through 12 can attend online school. But, I mean, we know with COVID, like, what that's going to do, right? It's like barely anything. But apparently, Delhi has extreme pollution. In fact, they say, and obviously it depends on which chart you're checking out, but it's the highest globally. And this isn't just impacting schools, but there are international events that are being canceled in Delhi because of this. So obviously, this is an incredible opportunity for restoration. We have to get control. I mean, you have to breathe. I mean, if you're a human, you have to breathe. We have to fix, any places that have any kind of pollution issues like this. It needs to be a priority as part of the restoration plan. Next story is about the lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Don't we love our lobbyists? I don't know if you've ever done a deep dive into the travesty known as the lobbyist, but rarely do they do much good. Let's just put it that way. They are hired by big companies to try to pass bills in the favor of said company. And they're paid a lot of money and they do a lot of schmoozing and it's just a lot of ickiness. Okay, that's the best way that I can describe this. This is not focused on the betterment of constituents and, people, that these congressmen, represent has nothing to do with that. This is just about passing a bill and making more money for these corporations. So this story is about, it basically analyzes different anti-protest bills that were proposed across 45 different states. So we're not necessarily talking about, I guess it could be Washington, but also the individual states, okay, and their state Congress. And what they found is that there were more than 250 anti-protest bills that were proposed across these states. And this is in response to mainly environmental and racial justice movements. And the big question here is, wow, first of all, that's a lot of anti-protest bills. And second, doesn't that infringe on constitutional beliefs like the, free speech? Hello. The ability and the right to gather peacefully, to peacefully assemble. So these are rights that are ensured in the U.S. Bill of Rights that covers everybody in the United States. I don't care what state you're in. And so how can these lobbyists be encouraging, and it's lawmakers too. I mean, they're at fault here too. How could anything be passed that would infringe on our constitutional beliefs? It doesn't make sense. This also says that there has been an increase in SLAPP, S-L-A-P-P, which stands for Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation, essentially kind of the same thing. And the whole idea is to intimidate activists and to suppress dissent. Because what does that do? I mean, it cannot help these large corporations for people to, peacefully gather to protest, in this case, fossil fuel companies. So you just can't control the narrative, right? People have their cell phones and they're recording this and it's being shared and hashtagged and all that kind of stuff. They are finding that they cannot control things. So they just want to do away with it altogether. So let's hope that these anti-protest bills, even if they are proposed, that they don't go anywhere. But at least we're aware now that this is happening. And our final story is a recall that I wanted to mention because for parents out there, you may have this in your cupboard and you may want to watch for this. So this is about a fruit pouch recall. Federal health officials are warning against certain brands that are making apple cinnamon fruit purees. Okay, so if you have that in your cabinet, there's multiple brands that are affected. So I would just say if you have that in your cabinet, period, just get rid of it. Just throw it away. What they're saying is that it has dangerous amounts of lead and illnesses have been reported in 5 U.S. states. Symptoms include headaches, stomach pain, vomiting, and if things get more serious, not to scare you, but just so you're aware, it could lead to brain damage as well as damage to your nervous system. So again, check your cabinet or your, what is it called? A pantry. I couldn't think of the word. I'm like, do people call it cabinet? I think it's a pantry. Check your food pantry and see if this is in there. If it is, just throw it away. Okay, let's just avoid all of them for a while. Now it's time for the World Situation Report with Kimberly Gogan from the Office of the Guardian. If you haven't heard of the Office of the Guardian before, know that this is not some crazy title that we just made up. There has been an Office of the Guardian for a very long time. Multiple people or beings have had this title. Kimberly is the latest, and she is our current Office of the Guardian. Sometimes we call her Ground Command as well. And she is here to help us, humanity, and all living beings on this planet, but people of the light side, to transition and helping us with this whole transition to the light age. Now, that has already taken place. However, there are people that, were reigning pretty much in the dark age that do not want to give up their seat of power. What they don't understand is they never really had any power. All of their quote unquote power came from above, because there was a large pyramid, if you can picture a pyramid, and a lot of people above them. But this whole process was kind of set up like it was compartmentalized, like the military or, like the police force, where you really know only your portion of the diabolical plan. So what's happened is all their bosses have been taken out, and now we're at the very bottom of this pyramid, right before you get to the people. So you are dealing with militaries, you are dealing with generals, and not just in the U.S., okay? These are militaries and generals all over the world. You are dealing with families that have been what, we would call slave masters. So we're the slaves. They're the masters of us. Now they think they're in charge, but really they were just the slave masters, and now their bosses are gone. And it's very hard for someone who thought they were in charge to suddenly give up power when literally we have been in a dark age for millions and millions of years. So someone just suddenly says, hey, now things are different. We're on the light side. They need a little convincing. Let's just put it that way. We're going to talk about that more in today's World Situation Report. But first, what we talk about at the start of the report is basically giving an update of what's happening in the war in Israel, okay? We know this is a fake war, not that people aren't getting hurt. I want to be very clear about that. There are real things happening, right? Real missiles are being fired. Real people are dying. That includes children. Yes, it does. And it is a very horrible thing that is happening. What we are saying is that this didn't just naturally happen, okay? There are people at the top that orchestrate this, and they don't care who dies because their focus is on complete world domination, and they believe the more people that die, the more opportunity they have to invite their little demon buddies back to the planet to help them to secure this whole plan for world domination, which includes taking over the financial system, which they do not have control over now, and they will never have control over again. But again, that is very hard for them to believe. So there's a lot of information going out right now, but they are perpetuating this war, and it's a fake war. They are promising fake money for people to, participate in this war. There's a lot of promises of, oh, you're going to get paid. And then that day comes and goes. Oh, no, it's going to be this day. And then that day comes and goes. And there's promises of money, and everyone's really getting fed up. So the first thing that we talk about is the fact that Americans are actually bombing their own bases. And right now they're blaming it on Iran. So here's the latest.
I'll just say remaining, for what it's worth, people from the Order of the Dragon, be them Rothschild or whoever they are repeating the same things that they've done before. So in 2019, the Americans actually bombed their own bases in the Middle East and harmed a lot of our own soldiers. Yes, they did. And today is, and over the weekend, is no exception. They are doing the same thing right now, and they're blaming it on Iran. I know. As Secretary Blinken was over there, saying, please, Iran, stop bombing us. Boy, I'm telling you, these people are not read in any way, shape, or form as to what's going on in the world. Now, NATO is Rothschild's private army. And when I say Rothschild, I mean the whole Order of the Dragon. So NATO has been calling the shots pretty much on behalf of that family or the families throughout the Middle East for the last, I don't know, week or so, maybe a little longer. Langley 5, of course, is involved, and they're just repeating the same things that they've done before that have always worked, but they're not really working now. Mm-hmm. So we've told you a while back that Khamene, which is the head imam in the Middle East, is no longer with us. But they have actually installed 3 NATO agents to take the place of Khamene. So behind the scenes, the Iraqi prime minister actually visited fake Khamene over the weekend and left very frustrated. So we had to try to get the dialogue that took place between the two of them. And now it makes sense. So fake Khamene, aka NATO agent, actually told them that, yes, they took the credit for bombing the American bases, knowing full well and good that it didn't happen. So it did not come from Iran. Right. But the prime minister kind of suspected he wasn't meeting with someone he's met with many times before. So he had a little conversation with him and said something like, and this isn't what he said, but I'll give you kind of a general idea. He said something like, yeah, do you remember when we went fishing, over there in the whatever area, and we had, what a great time we had, which is something that like never happened. And he goes, yeah, what a great, we're going to have to do that again sometime. And this guy was livid.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty smart on his part, though. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, pretty smart.
So more and more. Yeah.
Word is getting out now that Khamene is not Khamene anymore. So like I said, you can't, it's really, really hard to fake it till you make it for the Rothschild family these days. Yeetal. That doesn't mean there's not bad things happening in the Middle East, but I just thought I'd update you there. Now, and I'm having flashbacks and deja vu here because they have issued more fake dinar, the new Iraqi dinar, and gave pallets of it to the Hezbollah also this weekend for their cooperation because they were not participating. They said that they could only afford to shoot like 3 rockets a day. That's about all we can do right now. So they gave them some fake pallets in hopes that they would gain more cooperation in killing people in Lebanon and in Israel. So did they actually do it? Not yet, because everybody believes this money will be good tomorrow. Now, the same thing is happening in Iran with the fake pallets of cash. It's been a day. Fake pallets of cash, which were USD, which were sent to Iran and Saudi Arabia. So they're all being told by NATO agents on behalf of the rotten children that this money will be made good tomorrow and you can deposit it and everything will be great. And of course, that won't happen. People have been trying to cash new dinar for years, not only average everyday folks that bought it, but also folks like the Taliban and some of the other participants in previous wars. And Iran has officially been trying to cash their pallets of cash now for 4 decades and has been unsuccessful. Saudi Arabia since the 80s, and they have been unsuccessful. So people are not really moving based on fake money. There might be some donations of weapons and whatnot, but, they're not really getting anywhere. So the Americans absolutely, on behalf of these generals that we keep talking about, had to bomb themselves because nobody's doing anything, which is something that already happened just 3-4 years ago. Yeah. So, and everybody knows it. Everybody in the Middle East knows what's going on right now. They are trying to start World War III, but unfortunately for you, you have Mo Rothschild, Larry Rothschild, and Curly Rothschild trying to run an operation, and they're failing miserably.
Yes, they are failing miserably, and things are getting worse for the deep state. They're getting better for us on the light side because we are getting more help. So, you guys have heard us talk about the archivists before, and typically the archivists have a very neutral role, and that is to record history. So, when things get passed through the Hall of Records, they are recording things to preserve what is happening on this planet. But they now have a slightly different role. Here's Kim with more.
We had a new development happen over the weekend. Now, we know that there's been a lot of visiting others. We have talked about the coalition. We have talked about the Intergalactic Council or the Universal Council. We have talked about the colonies and all of those that have been strategizing, let's just say, against the dark.
Right.
Now, we got a very exciting call from the archivists over the weekend, and this isn't your national archivists. These are the global archivists who are not exactly people. And they have said that they now have permission to do what's called clear the field.
Okay.
Now, in military terms, the field is where you are outside the country, you are outside your base, you are outside, and you are actively engaging in battle. That's your field.
Yeah.
And or to be out in the field means you're out doing an operation, you're out doing something. And they have permission to assist now in clearing the field, which means, in this case, the field is Earth.
Okay.
That means that they are now actively participating and have proven it, that they are everywhere right now, running around clearing the field. Now, let me give you an example of clearing the field.
Okay.
So they have been working on militaries and intelligence agencies and those that think they run them. That's kind of been this all took place on late Friday afternoon, so they have been working since then. So their first stop was the Pentagon. So they are sitting everybody down. They are explaining this is the way that it is, and this is the way that it's going to be. If you do not want to participate, you will depart this planet in a rapid fashion. So I know.
I'm trying to visualize this. Like they physically went to the Pentagon.
Physically.
And sat down who? Like the top people at the Pentagon?
Yeah, top brass and some, known Jesuit generals that, just can't give it up, and others that are what you would call Rothschild babies, and they like to follow orders from NATO and want to get on with the war. Some seen people, some unseen people. So, some you might recognize from the news and some not. And for the most part, the people that they sat down with, they knew were the problem people.
Okay.
And they have a very clear view on who the problem people are on this planet. Mm-hmm. So all but 8 of them pretty well said, okay. And 8 of them decided to argue with the archivists. Now, shame on them, because the archivists are extremely talented people. Let's call them, they're not people, but they're people, which means they can fight the same way I fight, the same way you'll fight one day in the face of an enemy. Right. We don't need guns. We don't need a lot of stuff. Sure, we have cool stuff. But when you're faced face to face with a person that is threatening your life or the life of an innocent, such as your family or your child, you can defend yourself in rapid succession without pulling a gun, a weapon, or your fist.
Yep.
So you have this ability. I know. If you've ever watched a Jackie Chan movie, and they talk about the 7-inch punch and using your chi and all of this, well, it doesn't really work exactly the way that they say in the movies, but I will tell you that there's a lot of truth to that. You can throw your energy like nobody's business. And these guys, you can do it sitting in your home, and you can do it to somebody across the planet. But it can, if you're using source energy, it has to be in accordance with source law.
Right.
Period. End of story. Same way that key intelligence and military system works. So they warned these people 6 times. 6 times.
Within that meeting, Kim? 6
Within
times?
that meeting, 6 times. Because, you know, especially military people, they have a way of just like yelling and screaming at you when they don't get it's loud. Yeah. It's loud.
Yeah.
And they just yell, and the more you talk, the louder they yell, especially in the upper ranks.
Wow. And
so they just kept talking over them and yelling and screaming and yelling and screaming because I don't know, I guess that works with other military people. It's not a language that I personally speak. Like, yeah. You know, but I've had it happen to me several times, and I just kind of sit there until they get tired, because you can't say anything, especially when you're a female. You just can't. So you just let them go until they get tired, and eventually they shut up when they realize you're like A, not listening, and B, you're just like, you know, you're not fazed by what they're doing, you're not getting anywhere. But it's more in military ranks than it is in operative ranks, you know, it's or agency ranks. So they, in front of everybody, departed 8 people.
Like demolecularize them? Or
Like gone from the planet. Yep.
Wow.
Right in front of them. So you would think that would make a difference. You know, we'll see. This was, less than 72 hours ago. So we'll see.
The other thing Kim and I talk about with regard to the archivists is they are now on their way over to NATO because they have word that NATO is carrying out these orders in Israel, trying to kill people and do this horrible stuff. And they are going to tell NATO the same thing they told the Pentagon. Let's hope that NATO, which they literally arrived at later today after our newscast, let's hope they make smart life decisions, or else I'm sure we'll get an update on Wednesday that several of them have left the planet as well. So this is a very good thing because we are getting more help, and more help means the bad people that are standing in the way of restoration are going away, going back to source, back to creator, and creator can sort it out, you know, what happens with their souls, okay? But here on this planet, we are about restoration. But we have to know what's going on, right? Well, now you know this is what's going on. The other thing that's really interesting that Kim and I talk about is the Majestic 12. Now, I'll just give you a real quick teaser about this, but you really need to watch the World Situation Report and the newscast in order to get all of it. So this was a group originally of 12 people. They are human, but they have amazing human potential. So they find these people when they're kids, they bring them into the program, they feed them this gnarly concoction. Technically, it's organic, but it's hideous how they get this stuff. But let's just say they have ways of taking things from babies in utero and using it to make people smarter. Of course, they love their adrenochrome. They love harming, innocent children. This is what the deep state does, okay? But they have kept these 12 people that are like savants, and they feed them this organic material that comes from a fetus, and it basically expands their brain, okay? You've heard that most humans use like 10% of their brain or less. Well, these people use up to 50% of their brain, and you can't even talk to them, Kim said, because they don't talk in normal sentences. They also can't mingle about in society, because they would stand out like a sore thumb. They would go crazy because we're living in a false matrix. They understand all of that, right? And so the deep state has kept these people hidden, and it started with 12, and we are now down to 3. And we found out that this is how the deep state was concocting all their horrific plans, is they were using these people to give them calculations on what would work to bring back their little demon friends and take over the world. See, Kim thought originally it was just like old manuscripts and books and stuff like that, and there may have been some of that in there. But really, it was about the Majestic 12, which is now the Majestic 3. And the archivists fit into this as well because they paid them a visit and were able to change things. So the 3 that are left are still there. But if you want the whole story, it's very interesting because, quite frankly, I didn't even know the Majestic 12 existed. But leave it to the deep state to do something horrific like this, right? All right, so that wraps up the rundown for today. I know we talked about a lot of stuff that may seem a little out there for people that are new to this type of information, but I encourage you guys, do some research on the topics that we talk about. Continue to have an open mind. Even if this completely goes against everything you thought, maybe you are on the white hat side and suddenly nothing's happening with the white hats and what's going on with Trump, and you decide, maybe I should look up some additional information. You end up finding this podcast. I know this is way different than Trump saving babies. Trust me, he's not saving babies. The exact opposite is happening. But this is good for humanity, and we are going in the right path. It's just we've been lied to about everything. So I understand if you're listening to this and you feel overwhelmed. This stuff may be coming at you like like you're drinking out of a fire hose. I get it. I've been in that position before. Stick with this. Do some research. Think critically. Use your discernment. And if this is starting to make sense to you and you want to share this podcast, this is the best way to start getting information out there. So please share this episode and the entire podcast with people you care about. If you want more information about us and what we do, you can check out unitednetwork.tv. That's where you can get on-demand access to all of our UNN newscasts, complete world situation reports. So if you want to learn more about the Majestic 12, that's where you need to go. We also have original series that I'm sure you're going to love. And if you want to connect with us, we have a special link for you. You can go to unitednetwork.news/connect. That has links to all of our Telegram channels, our websites, everything that you could want having to do with United Network News as well as CARE. So check it out. We hope to hear from you guys. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.